I'm listening to a podcast a day, maybe 2 or 3.
What are your favorite podcasts?
So I like Rogan. I'm into Jordan Peterson a little bit right now.
Oh, same.
Like, and he's doing a lot of good interviews, so I
really
find that impressive. Patrick Bet-David, really big fan of Patrick Bet-David. I could listen to PBD podcasts pretty much every day. But
he's a huge real estate guy. I didn't realize.
Yeah, dude, he's in insurance, I think, as like a basis, but I think he sells and coaches a lot of real estate people. Mm-hmm. So I think he just is kind of blending into both angles. But yeah, from like an entrepreneurial perspective, I find he has a lot of good takes. So yeah, I'm into that. I think anybody who's taking a sensible approach to life, I'm willing to listen to right now.
Yeah, searching for the truth.
Give me more. Yeah, exactly.
Having truthful conversations.
Yeah, insightful people who have done things like experience-wise, you know. In the terms of like Patrick Bet-David, he just took a company from nothing to exit hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think that if that person's speaking, I'm interested. I need to know more. How did you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, these guys have legitimate careers outside of just podcasting.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm more interested in people that are creating content from a place of experience. I think that sometimes content coming from just the purpose of, you know, marketing or media is good, but it's limiting, you know. But, you know, at the same time, curiosity is interesting. So like people that are coming at it like yourself, like coming at it from a curiosity perspective of learning as you go. Wow. It's impressive. It's a great way. I think too embarrassed to do it that way because I think I would, it's a commitment to learn in front of other people.
Learning out loud.
Oh man, you got to be brave to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, years ago I lived in Costa Rica with my wife for like a year, and we were out there and I wanted to learn how to surf. And so I'm talking to this guy that, you know, I go out into the ocean and the ocean keeps throwing me back, you know, over and over and over again. I can't even get past the surf, you know. And I come to the shore and there's a young guy, wetsuit, sitting on the side. And he's like, he was from Jersey and he surfed his whole life. And he goes, have you ever surfed before? I'm like, no, dude, never. And he's like, yeah, it shows. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. And he goes, you know, this isn't the wave or this isn't the ocean to learn. Like, you're going to die. You should be careful. And that's fair. But at the same time, I learned the valuable lesson that like surfing's one of those examples where you can't fake it. You either are or you aren't. You know, you can't just sit there and be like, I'm a surfer. Go, and everyone knows you're not, you know? And so there's something kind of empowering about something like that. I kind of like that whole mantra of like, you can't fake this.
And you think podcasting's related to that? Like you can't fake it?
I think you either are good at things and you can learn to be better at things. But if you have no interest in things, you tend to not even pick it up in the first place, right? And so like, I don't know if I've kind of ranted off and lost the plot, but I think like most of the time, I think podcasting is one of those skills that curiosity over can outperform a lot of things. And then having a background of which you're coming from a place of a lot of knowledge combined with that curiosity seems to be the winning ticket for a lot of people. I think
that's why Rogan's just the champ, because he's so curious about so many different topics, but then he just brings so much experience in so many different areas of life, in martial arts, in comedy, in the entertainment business. And he's just a really cool, interesting guy with a lot of life experience that he can intertwine amidst all his curiosities.
Yeah. And I think you're bang on. And I think as you're saying that, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, and he like supremely focused on each one of those things. So I think sometimes like a weakness for me is like I can get, when I was younger, I would get distracted by shiny things. And so in doing that, you know, it's hard to be good at things when you're always bouncing around and doing a lot of things, you know. And for real estate, for me now, I've been in real estate almost 15 years. It took a long time for me to come to grips with the fact that that's what I do. You know, I don't know if that's normal or not, but I always kind of was doing it and didn't really think of it as the thing that I do. And now at my age I just turned 40, I'm looking at it like, no, that's your thing now. Like, that's your thing. You got 30, 40 years of work and career and kind of getting better at a craft. What are you going to do for that time? I'm really comfortable now saying that it's real estate and I'm going to become the best at that I can be. And I think it's important to kind of, you know, commit to something like that.
Are you just now consciously putting your stake in the ground saying, I'm going to be known for real estate, this is my thing? Is that now just happening?
I think I just did that. Yeah, no, I think that's what just happened. Yeah, no,
So was there a small window in the back of your mind, like before this, let's say in the last decade, where you're like, maybe I'll switch to something else?
I think I always had these grandeur thoughts of like being an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Always, my whole life, I've wanted to be an entrepreneur. Both my parents were in corporate life, and I knew that was never going to be for me, just because I didn't like being told what to do with no control of altering the conversation. Like, that just was never in it for me. So I always kind of was like, no, I think that's the only thing I can do. When I was a little kid, like maybe 7 or 8, I don't know what grade that would be, I had a teacher tell me one time, and she was just like berating me for talking too much in class. She's like, Steven, I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to sell something really well. And she followed that up by saying, I just hope it's something good. So yeah, I just always kind of knew that was going to be my avenue. But real estate really became a thing for me where I did it, and I've had just totally different reasons for doing it all the way through. I started at 23 working for my now father-in-law, managing condominium corporations. And so I started doing that because that was the only thing I could do, right? I came out of school and it was like, there's a job there, do that. And I learned so fast because I was in a very intimate situation. This is my father-in-law, my mother-in-law. It's a very family business. And in no time, I was managing 1,200 doors, wow. 10 or 15 corporations at any given time. And really knowing nothing, right? Like, I didn't know what to do, so I had to learn on the fly. And so it allowed me.
That's a big operation, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it was. And only in hindsight does it look like a big operation. And the minute when you're sitting there, you're like, this is chaos. Like, this is what it is. But it's just the nature of that business. It's chaotic. It's managing condominium corporations is kind of a chaotic business. Just a lot of moving parts, a lot of legal things, a lot of corporate documents and annual general meetings and all those things, right? And so learning all of that right away kind of forced me to figure things out and learn on my own and contact people that were smarter than me. That was kind of the first thing I did, and started learning from lawyers and architects and engineers and just taking their time because they kind of had to talk to me because they were getting paid by the condo corps. So then it was an opportunity for me to sit there and be like, look, how do I do this? What is the Condo Act? What are these people talking about? And then they would teach it to me.
Wow.
And now
education, man.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, now the industry's come a long way, and now there's a lot of structure, just like real estate agents have to do and realtors have to do, as far as like training and education and courses and programs. But 2004, there was really nothing.
And where was this?
We worked out of Markham, and we covered pretty much the GTA from Mississauga to Oshawa, Ajax.
Where did you grow up again?
I grew up in Pickering. So I was born in Scarborough, raised in Pickering. And never really ventured too far out of that area for a long time. I was kind of an East End guy. Married my wife, who's from Vaughan. And
Italian?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Half and half, right? She's half Irish, half Italian. So
same.
Yeah, it really.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting combination.
So you know how to duck and you know how to weave.
I'm not much of a fight. My last fight was in high school, man.
How'd you do?
It was a 25-year-old man that had kind of...
oh, man, that's not a high school fight.
No, it wasn't. That's like a
assault.
guy my age.
Yeah, no, that's not right.
So, and he was really drunk, and I just dodged ducking and weaving.
Yeah.
I don't know if I threw a single punch. We just got out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good. That got you ready for your relationship, I guess. Yeah, for me, it was we worked in the GTA area, and so you got to see a lot of different things, different people, different cultures, different setups. Managing a townhome corporation in Scarborough was not the same as managing a small retail industrial building in Mississauga. Like, those two things are lifetimes apart. We did we managed an old age home in Durham area that had government assisted seniors that were on the end of their years and limited budgets, and kind of watching that whole process was really interesting.
You learn so much from seeing the different demographics of renters, and just so much about life too, and how people live and stages of life and what their needs are. And
so like going through those condo corps, a lot of those people were owners, right? There were some that were renters. The building with the seniors were renters. But you had to learn how to talk to people with respect. Nobody calls you for like, it's a good day. Nobody calls you just to say hello. So that business teaches you a lot just in that first early years. Like I learned a lot about real estate, just learning like, what is it that this person's trying to accomplish? What are they calling me for? Why are they just screaming at me? And, you know, I got really good at being too young to realize what I was doing. Just when somebody starts screaming at you, just taking a beat and be like, hey, how are you? How's your day going? Mm-hmm. It would disarm people and kind of bring things back, you know.
Bring the humanity back.
I think so.
Conversation.
Yeah. And so I managed property for many, many years, learning a lot of those things, and then morphed into real estate because I'm a little older than you. So it's like I was watching at 26, right? I was watching the flipping shows, and I got really hooked on Armando Montalongo.
Okay, I'm not sure who that is.
I know.
I like the name though.
Nobody does, but he was a flipping guy on one of the HGTV shows in San Antonio, and I just saw this like business model where like this guy just went and looked at houses all day, and he would buy some and he'd fix them and he'd sell them. I'm like, that's a business. Like, all right, I'm into that.
Yeah.
You know. But then when I went out to my like family or people that I knew, I'm like, this is what I want to do. At the time, it's like, that's not a thing. Like, you got to go be a realtor. That's how you get into real estate. So I'm like, okay. So I went and did that. Got my real estate license. Quickly learned that wasn't really the thing I wanted to do, right? Like I didn't really want to be a realtor. I just wanted to do this thing. So I think for a lot of my career, it's kind of been struggling to figure out my niche in real estate. I've sold condos. I've worked in condos. I've lived in condos. So that felt like the first progression I got into. And then morphed into my wife and I, like I said, we moved to Costa Rica, and I was about 27-ish. We had a pre-construction condo that we had bought, and the project got delayed for, in the end, 6 years.
Oh.
When I went in on the project, I was cocky and arrogant, and I thought I knew so much. You know, I'd managed these things. I had been in real estate. I was now selling condos downtown pre-construction. I was so smart, and it's always critical last words, right? I was so smart. And at the time, I got into a project that eventually turned into a really, really good project. What I didn't understand at the time was how important and valuable time was. So I gave my deposit on a pre-construction project, but I didn't have enough capital to make that investment educated. Like that wasn't a smart investment. It was just like I put my money there and I was betting. I was gambling. And the gamble in the end worked out, but it just had this time delay of 6 years, right? And in that whole time, you're waiting for a mortgage. You're waiting to take and be in a position where you can accept this thing and close on it. And at the exact same time, everyone you grew up with watched you make this decision that doesn't fit the norm. And so every party you go to, every time you go to an event, everyone's like, hey, how's that condo? It sucks. Yeah, it didn't go well. Hey, I heard this about that condo. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah. And so it just got to be a lot of negativity.
Was that your first investment?
It was my first investment in properties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, I think it was, it was one of those things where I'd saved a bunch of money and I pulled the trigger and went after and speculated. And didn't really understand what the difference was between speculating and investing, and just sort of went after it.
What a wild first investment to make.
Yeah.
Did you own your own home here first? Like, did you?
Oh, I didn't do it in Costa Rica. To be clear, the reason I landed in Costa Rica was because of that investment.
Oh, the investment was here.
Yeah,
I thought the condo was in Costa Rica.
No, sir.
Like, that's pretty ballsy,
in Ontario. Man. No. That would be a crazy story. No, what happened is I made a decision here in Ontario. And then the negativity of the bad decision kind of piled up for a couple of years, and it led me to look for alternative things to do. Like, what do I really want to do? And my wife was in the same mindset, and so we just moved to Costa Rica. So that was easy to kind of disconnect.
So what was the plan when you went down there?
There wasn't a plan. There was I need to be somewhere that isn't here, and we had gone to Costa Rica. in April with some friends and done a 10-day stay, seen pretty much the entire province or country, because we had landed in there and it looked like it was an easy drive to get around. So we just drove around and saw the whole thing and loved the people, loved the place, thought it was a great place to be. Came home. I was at a gas station in the middle of the night as we got off the flight, pumping gas into my car. The guy beside me starts kicking the gas pump and just beating it up. I don't know why. It was 2 a.m. Guy just pump wasn't working. I literally looked in my vehicle, told my wife, I'm like, we're out of here. These people are crazy.
That's the last straw.
That was it. I'm out of here.
Sometimes it's the last straw.
Yeah. I'm like, this is it. This is nuts. And so in the next, I don't know, couple of weeks, month, we sold all our stuff and had this condo pending. So I had an investment that was coming. So we just jumped into it and got out there and lived there for about a year.
How did you make it work? Just by selling everything? You built up some savings?
Had built up a lot of equity.
Were you planning on working down there?
Yeah, so we'd built up a lot of cash just by selling a lot of property. Figured I would figure it out, just that kind of mindset. I would figure it out. Got into real estate down there. The crazy part is when we pulled that trigger, it was right after the Great Recession. So it was like 2010 timeframe. They had really taken it hard. A lot of their investors were American. So there's half-built projects everywhere. It was really decimated real estate market, which again, just like teaching you as you go, like that whole, I guess that would be like the overarching ethos of my working career. It's like I figure things out as I go, and have figured things out as I go. And so when I got into that market, looking at this, just destruction was what it really was. It was destruction at the time. And talking to a nice guy that I met, Italian guy who was a realtor there. And when I explained what I had come from, this crazy real estate market of pre-construction condos where like people are buying 30 at a time and this thing's madness. And I'll never forget his voice. And he said to me, Steve, why did you move here?
Yeah.
What are you doing here? Go back. And you're like, yeah, okay. And then actually, I didn't really realize that. We came home for rainy season, my wife and I, and we lived in Ottawa for 3-4 months while we were waiting through the summer to go back down. And she got pregnant with my daughter, and that was it. We never really left. We stayed here, and then I had to make real estate work again and take another crack at it. We closed on the condo. The irony of the whole story is I had a 2-bedroom condo I didn't need. Once my wife was pregnant, we closed 1 month before my daughter was born, where I needed the 2nd bedroom and a place to live.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like, I'm a big believer God gives you kind of what you need when you need it. And that was a big thing for me.
Were you upset about not going back to Costa Rica, or that had served its purpose? It gave you some time to reflect and look at your situation from the outside in?
I think I'm still upset about not going back to Costa Rica.
What was the lifestyle like back then? So the market was decimated down there, but just what did you do for the year?
Yeah, so we opened, I was there for about 3 months, 2.5 months, and got bored really quick. Had seen a lot of things, like had been around and seen stuff, but was just like entrepreneurial itch was going.
Just for the purpose of doing stuff, because you needed to put your mind to something, to build something, or just because you wanted more opportunity to raise your quality of life? Like why? No,
it was just strictly, it's funny because now I'm looking back at it, it's 13 years later. Like, I don't know. I was just a kid. I was just foolish. And I was like, wow, I can do anything. What do you mean? Like, I can figure this out. And so, yeah, there was really no plan to that. Like, as you're saying it, I'm listening, and I'm like, no, like I was on a beach every day trying to learn how to surf. We'd go out and cruise around. I'd get groceries. I'd make dinner. I'd watch sunsets.
Doesn't sound so bad.
No, it was beautiful. And then eventually there just got to be part, like, there's got to be something else I can do. Can I do something else while I'm here? And then you're watching and taking in things. And anyways, there was a small commercial building that was vacant. And so I went and talked to the landlord, figured out a rent, which was cheap at the time. And we opened a little wrap shop, like essentially ripped off Pita Pit. I don't know if I can say that, but I just took your idea. It was a great idea. There was a lot of other people doing things down there that were already being established. So like American barbecue and Italian guys making pizza and but there was no quick wrap chicken and lettuce and valuable kind of sustenance that you can just grab and go. And so we were just up from the surf spot. Again, the location was really good, so it made sense. We hired some locals to make chicken on a barbecue out front, and we called it, wrap it up, and we put a wrap on it and stir for special and out the door, and kind of just hung around. And
oh, wow. How was it? How'd the business do?
I mean, it was break even. Like, it was like a fun life. It's like, at the end of the day, do I have enough to eat?
Yeah.
Did I make enough to pay my bills, pay my employee, make my stuff? It wasn't about making money. It was just sustenance.
Yeah. Something to do.
Yeah. And at the same time, can you do that? Like, could you go to a foreign country with no knowledge, not speaking Spanish, not understanding a thing about the municipalities or the governments or any of their stuff, and start from nothing? And so that was fun. It was a process, and we got through it, and we did it. And so the victory wasn't the money on that side. It was the knowledge. I think a lot of that has got to be the case. Like, what did you learn from the situation? There's not really any failures. There's just learning and moving. And so, so that was kind of how that part of that life went, is just a learning process, and then learning and appreciating where you come from and what you have. And
you need that outside perspective, man.
I think so.
Otherwise, it's like, it's the air you breathe. You just don't know. You don't know what the culture is back home. You don't know what the opportunities are. You don't know what's good, what's bad, until you go somewhere else and you look back in.
Yeah. And you take things for granted, or you don't see opportunities, right? Like, I think the biggest thing is you just don't see opportunities. Like, in this version of my real estate career, I go into a city, and even though I haven't been there my entire life, I think that's my advantage. Because I come into the market with eyes from different places, and I start consuming things and looking and feeling and vibing and trying to feel out what's here and what's not here. And then you dive into the details, and you dive into and do your homework, right? And you spend, I'd like to spend 4, 5, 6 months just in the details and walking it and living it and seeing it, and then I'll take it to my clients. But at this point, I don't want to limit myself by saying I've always lived here. I think that's probably one of the biggest turnoffs I've had about being a realtor, is I never wanted to be isolated to just one place. I like to move. I like to keep moving. I like to keep doing things.
Yeah. So how do you balance that with being kind of stuck in one location, or being an area expert in one location? How do you balance that?
I'm open to new markets, and I learn very fast, and I have put my attention on a thesis, and I'd like to keep my thesis kind of moving and evolving. And so, like, if I look at Ontario as a whole, and I look at, all the general realtor things like immigration and the fact that we're landlocked by a body of water to our south, and nobody really lives anything more than 45 minutes north of the 401, and you kind of have these like sprawls that pop up, and like, you just learn the province as a whole. And so, I think I manage it by just having an ability to go macro to micro and just keep delving in and dropping in where I need to drop in.
So your overall thesis is that Ontario is a good place to invest in real estate? My
overall thesis is that the only thing that doesn't make sense building anymore are 45 by 120 foot lots with houses under 2,000 square feet. They can't build those anymore. The numbers don't work for a developer to build that anymore. So if that's the case, it can work. Theoretically, it can work, but you got to pay $1.5 million for the house, or $1.3 million for the house, or something like that. You get these bungalows that are downsizer friendly, let's just say. But for the most part, those are usually compacted into smaller lots, right? So the house might work, but the lot doesn't work. And the lot might work, but the house is bigger. Like, it's hard to find that niche of housing. And so my overall thesis is that that's a limited supply, and bringing new inventory to the market based on the government restrictions seems very challenging and difficult for many people. So the only thing that you can do when you get creative, and I'm a believer in creative real estate, the only thing you can do when you get creative is to start taking what you already have and rework it and reconfigure it and make it work so that it's something new within its original mold. And that's essentially been what I kind of work off of. It's what I explain to a lot of my clients, and it's how I kind of work to get them to a new solution.
Okay. So you come back from Costa Rica, you're back into selling real estate. How does your journey evolve in all the ways that it did since then?
So I spend the summer in Ottawa hanging out, where I find out my wife is pregnant. I lived in a house that faced the canal. And so I would spend pretty much all my day, like my entire day, bike riding up and down the canal. Not the entire day, that's a lie. But I worked night work, so I would work in restaurants and stuff because I was just picking up just picking up work because I was planning on going home. Like I was going back to Costa Rica. So it's just like fill a job, find something to do that pays me for a bit. And so, you know, working restaurants is easy for me. That's kind of my youth was spent doing that stuff. So, so I just moved into restaurants and working in a restaurant, but it allowed me to have these days where it's like, what am I going to do? So I would bike ride up and down the canal and just kind of get some work in. And I picked up a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad on MP3 on this weird thing that I could listen to this book only, you know.
Different times.
Yeah, it was different times. And anyways, I just obsessively listened to it over and over and over and over and over and over again for months and months and months. And then it was like, like an aha moment, like, I can do real estate and do this. Like I can figure out a way to help people who want to do investment work. Like that's my niche. Okay, that's good. How do I find that? That drove me back into the marketplace, go find somebody who does that and learn from them. I went and found some great mentors, harassed them until they would let me work with them. And then I spent...
That's what I did to get here.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's what anybody, if you're young, if you're out there and you're youthful and you're ambitious of trying to learn, then that's what you have to do. You just have to kind of value proposition somebody who knows what they're doing as to why you can help them and then be consistent and prove that you're willing to do that. And so that's what I did. And then they taught me a lot. I worked around a lot of people that taught me a lot in a very condensed... I think that's also like a key, is to find the people who are doing better than you or understand things better than you, and then just consistently ask good questions until you can learn. And so that's what I did. They taught me a lot about duplex conversions at the time, 2014, 2015. Oshawa went through a bit of a boom with duplex conversions. I got really into it, learned as much as I could, figured out, you know, what to look for, how to look for them, how to convert them, what is the bylaws, what's the Ontario Building Code, like started learning all of those things really quick. And then that brought me into this kind of niche.
At what point did you start working with other investors to help them do the same thing?
Again, within 6 months to a year of doing it myself, I was already a licensed realtor. I had been one for a while. Mm-hmm. So it was just like a blending of...
So it was natural to start working with other investors?
I think so, yeah. It just became like... It's a talent that a lot of people, like converting property and flipping property. I think a lot of the times when I talk to real estate investors, or new real estate investors, I should say, they make it out like it's so, they don't always, but some do. Let's not generalize, but some do make it out like that's the easy thing to do. Just like flipping houses is easy. Like, I don't want to do my job anymore. I want to just flip houses. It's easy. I thought that, right? Like I was watching some guy on TV and I'm like, that's easy. Mm-hmm. When I got into it,
takes 22 minutes.
No my gosh. Yeah. Once I got into it and I started digging into like, you know, learning from people that are flipping 30, 40 houses a year or do this for sustenance, like how to live and how to make income off of it. Like you figure out real quick, this is not easy. This is a very innate skill. Like you've learned something, you've done something, you've got systems, you've got processes, you understand a lot. And so, yeah, so as soon as I could unlock that and figure out a lot of those things and then translate it into how to do it for clients and kind of help them through it.
So were you primarily flipping? Were you doing buy and holds?
I think duplex conversions were the thing at the time.
Were you holding on to them after? And
we tried, yeah, like we would hold on to some of them. Again, in youthful knowledge, it's so hard to have hindsight and look back at what they're worth today compared to then. But there was a lot of tempting things, you know, buy them $340, do a little bit of work, sell them for $550. That was easy. That made a lot of sense. And so we would do those things in hindsight, like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Like, hold on to every property, right?
Yeah.
I was actually just golfing with my partner at the time just last week. And he's like, man, you know what? We made a mistake. I'm like, what? He's like, we sold everything that we should have held on to. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
I've never,
everybody says that.
ever met a real estate investor who didn't regret selling a property. Ever, unless they were selling the property to get out of a relationship or a joint venture partnership they were no longer interested in being in. I just haven't met the person that's like, I'm glad I sold that property.
Yeah, I would agree to those statements. I think
it's more so selling the relationship.
Yeah, I
that's
think
the only times I've heard it. Personally, I mean, I'm sure there's times where investors listening to this, they've offloaded something, flipped it into their personal home, or I don't know, done something.
I think that I think you make a good point in saying like the relationship, like how did you get to those houses? A lot of those houses were JV deals. A lot of those things are partnerships, and you're working with other people. And you know, in this version of me right now, I don't really want to do that too much anymore. I'm not into that. I'm not looking to raise capital. I'm not looking to manage people's investments in that sense. I'd rather be a service provider to them.
So what's changed? Why has your mentality changed around that?
Just experience, just time, just like you say, relationships, some work, some don't.
Just dealing with all the headaches and
just knowing what it comes with, right? There's a lot of brilliant people that I know that are JV partners and they do amazing things. And just in my own experience, I've enjoyed servicing people better than partnering with them. And so it's kind of just changed my opinion that way.
So a lot of people want to do joint venture partnerships, especially if they're strapped on resources. So how did you do it? How were you able to pull off all these different partnerships and stuff? Were you part of different real estate groups? Were you just doing your own marketing, friends, family?
Yeah, real estate groups. And I think you're talking to people, right? It's constantly talking to people and just trying to work towards the same goals and the same processes.
Were people more so attracted to you, or were you going out there in search of people? Or it just kind of naturally happened as you evolved and were surrounded by real estate?
The latter. Yeah, I'd say the latter. I think people naturally just know what you're up to and they kind of ask questions, and that kind of helps. And I think generally speaking, the vast majority of people that are retail real estate investors, they've got time constraints. The vast majority of them have time constraints. And so that's why JV partnerships agree for the active partner. That's why they exist, because they're willing to sacrifice those time constraints and they're willing to commit. And the other side just can't. And in this version of me now looking at it, I think that a lot of the times when I talk to these real estate investors that have time constraints, it's like, yeah, you should put more focus into what pays you month over month. What's your business? What's your job? What's your thing? Like, you should put more focus into that. And then find ways to leverage your time however you can. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to give up your equity, but if it does, that makes sense for you, then do that. But my service that I'm providing to clients is trying to help them so that if they don't want to give up their equity, they don't have to. A lot of the times it's just knowledge and experience. And
so how is that? So you think those time constraints that are limiting people from doing it themselves, what are you suggesting to them instead?
Power teams, right? Like having a really solid power team, having people boots on the ground saves a lot of time. Having people around you that can guide you through the process or save you a lot of time. So
still investing 100% for yourself, keeping the whole deal, but having a really good property manager, a really good tenant placement person. Really good.
That's where that is the trick. That is the trick. If you can't go 100% all into it, you need a power team. I think the JV guys that I've met in my career are fantastic people. Like, they are very, very good at what they do, and they deserve to be part of all of the transactions they're in, because they are working way harder than you think they are. Like, they are working extremely hard to keep those deals going and move everything forward. And they're the buffer between headaches and you, right? That's their role. And that makes a lot of sense. There's just a lot of people that I know and have met over time that they have a rub with that. Like, they don't want to give up their 50% equity, and they just exist. It's just a market segment that exists. And so as a realtor working, I just am trying to alleviate and service that part of the market. And that's where I help them. Now, I work for syndicates too. I help people that are on the active side, I help them with property. But again, it's not for me to come in and be like, hey, I'll be your partner. That's not for me anymore. That's the thing that I've removed from my business. Is like, hey, we should be 50-50 on this. Not for me, not anymore.
Do you think that people generally undervalue the expertise and management aspect of like what an active joint venture partner is bringing to the table? And more so focus on like, look, I'm providing the money, I'm getting the mortgage. That's the most valuable part of this deal. Do you think that's heavily overvalued? What's your just honest opinion?
Here's my example to that. Here's what I would say to that. Every Sunday when there's a major golf tournament on, I sit on the couch, I have my family over, I'm talking to my father-in-law, and we're watching these professional golfers play golf. And we can criticize and sit on the couch, and we each shoot in the mid 90s, high 90s on good days on good courses.
Yeah.
And we criticize drives, and we criticize chips, and we criticize
classic
putts,
sports fans.
right? Putts, and then we sit there and we have opinions. But we haven't put in the hours to be the golfer who can hit out of 18 holes, 12 amazing drives. We aren't the guy who can sit there and make 15 amazing putts. Mm-hmm. We're not that guy. Mm-hmm. We have no business commenting on how it got to be the point. You missed one, right? I think that in that analogy, the effort and time and energy it takes to be the 88th ranked PGA golfer is 10 to 30x the best amateur golfer at your golf course. And that's a valuable thing to be appreciative of. That's a lot of effort and energy just to get to that level. I think that if somebody has committed themselves to being an active partner and JV partner and is doing great at it, they've put in time. They just couldn't be that person without it. It's just impossible.
I think it's just like a human bias that we overvalue money over time in every area. Like we all do it with our own decisions. We're doing $10 tasks that we could easily outsource or, just get rid of or delegate. And it's just a hard thing to get over. We just don't value that time. And I think it's the same thing with like those years of experience where people just don't value the amount of effort and the amount of classes, the amount of podcasts, the amount of deals, the amount of mistakes somebody's made.
Dude, the mistakes. I think the mistakes is the first thing. Like you can't value about it. There's a great Jim Rohn line, right? Like and Jim Rohn, I don't know if you've ever, but just of course you have. Jim Rohn, when he says we don't listen to failures, right? Is that Jim Rohn or is that Zig Ziglar? One of the two. They don't give presentations, we should pay the failures to come up and talk, right? And yet we don't, but there's so much, Bill, you had everything going for you and you messed it all up. How'd you do it, right? Like there's something about it. The failure that active real estate investor partners have made has probably made them so strong that you want those people on your side. You want them to know what mistake they made. That's what you're really paying them for, is their mistakes. So I think, I think that people undervalue that. I also think that there's investors are putting a lot of their energy and faith into that investment. So they've put their money aside, and having empathy for them and understanding that that's their family's life savings, or that's the wealth creation that they're trying to pay their kids with. Like there's a lot of weight into where that money comes from. And so being able to respect that and protect that is also very important and should be held up, because that gets undervalued on the other side as well. I would say like the contrarian approach is that like sometimes I meet JV partners or active partners, and sometimes they can lose perspective of that as well.
That is true, because that accumulation of money and savings is also a representation of the time that it took to earn all that money.
And faith, right? Like they've got faith in you. They've got faith and they're in it with you. And so that's, all of those things kind of work together and create something good. But
do you think for more complex deals, maybe then it's more worth having someone as a partner who's an active investor? Like let's say you're doing single family home to a triplex conversion, and this is something they have experience with, and they have those time constraints in their life, or they're just not making the time for it. Then does it make more sense?
It's one of the it depends questions, right? Like it depends a lot on who the person is and what their skill sets are. Like for me, when I start talking to a new client or we're doing discovery calls, I always want to know what they do. Like, what do you do? And I don't want to know what they do necessarily for personal gain. Like I'm not trying to figure out like, oh, that guy makes a lot of money. No, like I'm asking because I want to know what your skill set is. If you're in IT and you're a project manager in an IT company, I know what your skill set is. I know you're very organized. I know what you like. I know your systems. I know what you're good at. There are certain skill sets that are going to work really well transitioning in. One of the greatest people I've learned from spent many, many years as a chef, as a culinary person. He does exceptionally well in real estate because there's a process and there's a system and there's a beginning and there's an end. And each project has a
and there's high pressure, there's deadlines, there's stress, there's team members.
He does amazing because he's got that background. So understanding where people are coming from as far as their job goes, it depends. Sometimes people are built a certain way or have certain attributes that is going to work really well to a triplex conversion. It's not brain surgery. Like we can do these things. I think fear gets in the way for most people. You can learn it. Do you want to learn it? Do you want to do those things? If you don't, then JV partner. But if you do and you want to take the time and learn it, it's not incredibly difficult. It's just going to be time consuming, and it's going to have, you have to accept that you're going to have failures and you have to work around those things. But some people have just natural attributes in their business and where they come from, that's okay.
Okay. So how has your own investing and business with your realtor side evolved over the years from doing those duplex conversions? Like what areas were you doing them? Now where are you at? What's the next stage of the journey here?
Started in Durham, ended 2016, 2017, exited out of Durham and my family and I moved to a place called Brampton.
Sorry, what comprises the Durham region exactly? What cities?
So Pickering would be the start because that's a Scarborough border. And then you move into Ajax, Whitby, Oshawa. And in recent years, Clarington has added to that area. So you've got Bowmanville and Newcastle and things like that. So
is that considered part of the GTA?
Yeah, I believe so. I think anything around that Golden Horseshoe area is definitely on there. 407 reaches from one end of Clarington and touches all the way down to where we are here today. That whole span is accessible to the Greater Toronto area. I would put it in the same category. It's like, does Newmarket count? Probably, right? It's close. It's kind of in that same description. So I think it would be comparable. The only other advantage is that you're right down the 401 and there's a GO line. So as soon as those two things implement, and that's again, why does Newmarket count? Well, it's got a lot of those things, right? So, it's accessible to the Greater
there's
Toronto
a big
area.
Sprawl happening. Like I grew up
happening.
been happening. Like I grew up in Brampton, and now Brampton to me just feels like a suburb of Toronto. Like it's just a matter of time before it's Toronto and this is, Brampton. Like just like in LA, all these different towns and cities amalgamated, like Long Beach and Compton and all these places. It's just all LA.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me.
From the outside looking in, yeah. Yeah. I think when you're in there, you were from there, it'll always be Brampton.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you identify with the community. There's people in Brampton that before Bramalea and Brampton combined and became Brampton. Yeah, they were like, oh, I'm from Bramalea.
Yeah.
But now that's a neighborhood in Brampton. What are you talking
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's a natural progression. Yeah.
Okay, so Durham region outwards.
And then I jump 2016, 2017, my family, we moved to a place called Brighton, which is along the 401 just outside Coburg, just past Coburg and Colburn. Stayed there for a couple of years. And then we got into Prince Edward County. I had never been to Prince Edward County before. Always went to Muskoka or the Kawarthas as a kid for cottages and stuff. So once we got out there, it was like a whole new world to discover.
What's it like there? How does it compare to Muskoka or the Kawarthas?
The body of water tends to be Lake Ontario, right? Like sandbanks, and a lot of the areas picked in those areas, they tend to be mostly attached. It's mostly Lake Ontario as your water frontage. So if you can get confused and look there and feel like you're at an ocean. It's very open and beautiful, and it's Lake Ontario, and you can actually swim in that lake, so it's nice that way.
Is the water cleaner up that ways?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not an expert on that stuff, but I would say it looks a lot cleaner. Yeah. I let my kids swim in it. I don't know if I
do. They have like the E. coli warnings and stuff sometimes up there?
I would imagine, yeah. I haven't seen any, but yeah, I'd imagine.
Okay, I'm sure it's cleaner than the Toronto water.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's much cleaner. But yeah, in the way that it varies is just it's a very much condensed area. In Muskoka, you can just keep driving north and you'll drive through Muskoka and just keep going. You miss it because you hit Algonquin, right? Whereas like the county is, you come off the 401, you go south, you loop back up and you come back north. It's a big U. And so it's a smaller condensed area in that sense. I mean, it's huge. It takes you an hour and a half to get from one like kitty corner running from one side to the other. There's not a lot of abilities to cut out traffic, right? Like roads, it's country roads. So.
And you're living there year round?
Yeah, live there year round. The goal is to be seasonal, be a seasonal resident, like to spend a bit of the wintry months down in south. My dad lives in Mexico, so we'd like to start to explore and living down there for a few months a year. But
how old are your kids? You mentioned the one daughter.
I have a daughter, 11, and my son turns 8 in 4 weeks.
Okay, so how are you thinking about the snowboard lifestyle with kids in tow? I
think COVID exposed a lot of things and showed that schooling is possible. We were exposed to a version of school where there's a digital virtual aspect that can be worked into any school program, and we're open to it. And so I don't have the answers, to be honest with you. I'm aiming towards that as a solution, and have buy-in from my kids who want the same thing. And so we'll make it work. And there's a lot of examples of how it works. And so I think that question, 5 years ago came with limitations. I think now I sit in a spot where it seems like it's reasonable. Like it seems like there's a solution there. I just got to figure it out.
So what's the lifestyle like in Prince Edward County? It's
very laid back.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's
laid
a
back.
tourist town.
Yeah, it seems like an amazing spot to live.
It is. Yeah, it's a tourist town. There's a lot of great people there. Lots of vineyards. You're looking at 40 plus distilleries, breweries, and vineyards. It's the mini Niagara, sometimes people call it. Don't tell the people in the county that's not acceptable, but it is a place that has those kind of vibes to it. You come into town and it feels like a summer vacation. It just feels like a summer vacation. My wife and daughter and my son was at a TFC game with his grandfather on Saturday, so he wasn't with us, but we were out at the beach hanging out for the day, and it's a vibe. It's a real nice place to be, and you can go grab a drink afterwards and a dinner, and it's nice. It's nice.
Yeah, it seems nice.
Yeah.
So then how has the investing changed in this region? Like, how has this whole market changed from maybe the last 10, 15 years of you experiencing this east side of Toronto to up north? I don't even know what you would call where you're at now, Prince Edward County. Like,
yeah, so basically it's a 401 trunk line, right? So where we're focusing is in a specific range between Port Hope and essentially the 416 that goes to Ottawa. And again, Ottawa being another dominant market that's got a lot of bullish features to it and a lot of expansion going on, and they're expanding down and coming into this area as well.
So you're experiencing overspill of population
by both
and investment interest on either end.
Yes, I think Toronto investors, predominantly my clients, are coming from Toronto or Ottawa, and they're reaching out because those two markets have gone up in value so high that they are looking for either exposure into cash flow generating markets such as Belleville or Quinte West, and then are looking for hedge markets like Kingston, which is a larger population. Belleville, Quinte West are all under 60,000 populations. Kingston is up around 150, 160,000 people. Like, there's a bigger market there. There could be more. It's just one of those things where there's 25,000 plus students in Kingston. So if you're coming from Ottawa, the smaller market would be Kingston. I tend to use the analogy for like Toronto investors. It's like if you were investing in Oshawa. Consider it the same as an Ottawa investor investing in Kingston. Mm-hmm. It's very similar in that nature. And as a Toronto investor investing in Kingston, it's a different Oshawa, right? It's just got different things about it, and it's very much population comparable, and there's a university there and a college and government jobs and a lot of those type of things. So it tends to be a market like that. So we are looking at explaining and helping people see that there's a nice blend that has to occur in your portfolio in which you have some exposure to cash flow generating properties in the smaller markets, and then you've got some really good potential upside on appreciation and plays like that in markets like Kingston and Ottawa and things like that. I think that the strategy, again, going back to that, what is my thesis, that still applies no matter what market I go into, right? Like, I think that it's prime real estate is the best, obviously. So get as close to the source of prime real estate as you can. Where's like the most heavily trafficked areas, and let's get in there. And I've really gotten big into Ricardo's law of rent, and there's some old economist stuff built into that of just based on like location, like how does things survive in downturns? You need to be prime real estate. There's a reason prime real estate always is in demand. It's prime. And so
what is that, Ricardo's law of rent?
So,
and who's Ricardo?
Yeah, so he was an economist in the turn of the 19th century, I believe. The idea is that, depending on the location, you can eliminate, features within it as far as labor is concerned and product is concerned, but that actual location is what causes this underlying rent that can never be worked out of the equation. So the best way I can explain it, because I'm not an economist, but I can say it in this way. They did this test or this theory, and so in which case they give all of these people in London at the turn of the century a newspaper. It's all the exact same newspaper, and they're all going to get paid based on how many newspapers get sold. And so everybody gets the same product, and they get sent out across London, England. And so inevitably, whoever hits the most populated corner in London, England, sells the most papers. So it doesn't matter how much better of a salesperson they were. It doesn't matter how much, the product was still the newspaper. It's like they were on the most populated corner, therefore, ergo, they sold the most. There's an underlying rent to the value of that property that just cannot be extrapolated out of the equation. It just is always going to be there. It's worth more because of that.
Oh, wow.
So it came from a book that I just read in January, Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. And it was built into this book. It was a really cool book. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's dense. It's like a textbook, but I highly recommend it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so like that underlining thesis of like, okay, so that's, today we say location. It all boils back down to this law of rent. And I just try to work that into the thesis that I carry to my clients and just be like, yeah, that's why we want to be in prime locations. I know it's going to cost a little more possibly or probably, and there's going to be a little less selection most likely, but you're going to get the dividends and the payoff of having that property in the long term just because it's built in that way.
So how do you balance that against being able to carry those properties?
Well, you do the best that you can within the budget that you're working with, and you try to maximize to the best of the ability of the client and what they're there. But I think ultimately, it's just making sure in that context, it's just making sure you don't make the mistake of ignoring that fact. Like, don't make the mistake of ignoring that fact. If you can get a $300,000 or $400,000 property, but you're in the wrong side of town in a very small town, there's a lot of risk built into that deal. I know it's within your budget, but there's an extreme amount of risk built into that deal. Like right now, we're seeing it in small markets. Belleville, Quinte West, these markets that I work in are getting saturated with a lot of rental units right now that have come to market just in the last 6 weeks, 4 weeks. When you're in those marketplaces, you want to make sure you have premium product to stand out, because all of a sudden the population isn't going to change overnight. It's not like we're going to have an influx of 30,000 new people to Belleville. That's not happening. So you want to make sure you have the best product on the market and make sure that you're providing the best quality so that you can attract the best talent.
Why is that happening right now? The saturation?
Combination of things. I think the main thing is that there's a lot of speculation that occurred in Belleville as far as individual units are concerned, like houses are concerned. A lot of Toronto investors and GTA investors came out and bought pre-construction bungalows on smaller lots that they believed were very cheap. Those units have now come to market, and the buyer of those units was also coming from Durham. So there was a downsizer that was selling their house in Durham for $1.4 million and then buying this house for say $900. And the speculator was able to pick up that house from the builder for, let's say, $650, $500, $700, anywhere in between. So there was a spread there. So like, oh, this is a great market. So they bought these pre-constructions. Well, because of the pullback in Oshawa, or because of the reduction in value in Oshawa, those people are now having to sell at like 1.1, maybe 1.2 million, and then get into a new mortgage. If they buy cash, they're buying in full cash at like 700, 800,000. That's a lot of cash to come out of your pocket at right now, and the spread isn't really a lot. And if they have to take a mortgage, they're taking a mortgage at 6%. And so that buyer has just chosen to sit put for now, right? They're just not migrating back into the area at the same volume as they were 12 months ago, 15 months ago. And so those speculators are now forced to bring units to rent. They have to wait this out a little. So they're bringing brand new construction to rent. So there's a lot of brand new builds that are renting full houses, nice, beautiful homes.
Because they just wanted to flip these to the Durham downsizers.
Yeah. And those guys have pulled back a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think as markets are cyclical, there's a season to everything. The season will pass as well, but for the time being, in the next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe longer, there's just a glut of units on the market right now that isn't the end of the world. There's still people renting every day, and units are being filled. It's just you have to be hedged out and ready for that. So
do you have a preference for single family homes that are older with more character that you can do more with, as opposed to these newer pre-construction homes that are coming on market? Like if you had a buyer and they just wanted to buy something in Belleville, what type of property would it be? I know you like the single family, but
yeah, I think the newer properties are good. They just have to make sense numbers wise, right? Like that's where it gets tight, right? Like if you're buying a new build at 800,000, 900,000 in Belleville, let's just say, the pushback that I typically run into is, well, that 800, 900,000 goes a long way in Hamilton. So why would I do that? Well, I get it. That makes a lot of sense. So until that number comes down back to where it was when the speculator bought, which is the 500 or 600 range, it may not make sense, even though it's a nice house, brand new, nothing to worry about.
How do they still have the
really
prices that high? Like, how are they even still trying to attempt prices that high?
Now you're asking me to assess and diagnose the mind of a seller. I don't know. I think sometimes people are committed to the price because that's what makes sense for them to exit without taking a loss. Sometimes you have people that are believe that their house is worth that, and therefore that's what they're going to sell for. And
so they just haven't conformed to the reality of the market.
Yeah, and or like somebody else. What always happens, I think, sometimes is like somebody does sell for that price, and then like the dream stays alive, right? Like somebody actually does get that price. You know, the conversation always with sellers has to then be, yeah, but that buyer's now out of the market. Like, are there more of them? If there's more of them, then yeah, that's all fine. But I think everybody's kind of just going through it's
and maybe like a realtor did them dirty and overbid on the place.
I don't know. It's just volatility. It's hard to know in these markets. It's very choppy. So like it's hard to be right 100% of the time anymore because but very hard to be right 100% of the time right now because who knows why? There's a lot of variables as to why these things aren't going to work this way. In March through May, we were seeing a lot more activity our way. Prices were moving. We were in multiple offers. I was in multiple offers in Belleville, which is shocking to a lot of people. Now that's at lower price points, 500 and under. But at the same time, those are now gone within a matter of weeks just because of the last rate increase. So it's just very turbulent right now. It's going to be choppy, and knowing why things happen is strange. But for the most part, there's just a lot of inventory on the market, and therefore I'm staying my focus into Kingston because it's hedged better with a bigger population base and a larger driver of tenants with the university being there. I feel that it's safer for investors to look at, and there are deals to be had. There's prices that are down, and there's deals to be had. We're doing deals in that marketplace right now that are really appealing and interesting and worth looking at. So it's just a matter of kind of just position.
You're not finding the same saturation in the Kingston market?
I think it's a different market altogether just because of the size of it, because of the student base that's flowing in and out and flowing in and out.
So you said the population of Kingston was 150,
160, yeah.
Is that including the 25,000 student population or no? Because they're just temporary.
Temporary. I'm not on the city statistics, but I would say that there's just that population exists within Kingston.
Yeah, got it. So it's still a strong base.
There's a strong
and then 25,000, like that's a decent size for a school.
It's Queens, man. It's Queens. I don't know. I wasn't smart enough to get in. I don't know. You look like a smart guy. I couldn't get in, like it's just one of those things where it's a good school. And if you're going to the school and you're in that, they're legacy people.
Yeah. Can you explain that? You mentioned that in our team meeting just now, the legacy aspect of it.
Well, when you meet people who go to Queens, there is a group of people that go to Queens that are very well, well connected into a family that has probably also gone to Queens. It's something to be proud of.
It's like a family rite of passage.
I think so. Yeah. I think so. When I've spoken to people that have done this and that are legacy students, there's a pride in it. Like they've got to perform, and they've got to live up to this name, and they've got to live up to what they've been, provided, like this legacy they've been blessed with, and so that they're living up to it and they're doing their best to do that. And so there's just a different quality about it than maybe somebody who, just goes to university and
So really I went to the University of Guelph Humber. It's like a little campus that's attached to Humber College in Rexdale.
Okay.
So in a Etobicoke area. And there's just like, it's 10 years old or 15 years old. I don't know. And it's like, it's a commuter school. Like everyone was still living at home in the GTA, a lot of Woodbridge kids, some Brampton kids. And there's just no culture or history to it. It's like you went, and the appeal of that school is you get a diploma from Humber and a university degree from University of Guelph. So it was cool. 4 years, you bang it out, you move on. You never think about it again.
Right.
Your kids don't want to go there. And I would argue like Queens, like you're saying, is like that, a legacy school where it runs in the family.
Yeah.
McMaster.
Yeah.
Western is a big one. Like I went to a friend's wedding and they were Western students they had met. And it was just all these Western vibes happening through the wedding. And in the speeches, they were talking about how important Western was and the families are there. I'm like, oh my God, this is like it's like a cult. Like it's like a Western cult. Like I get it. Like, I never had that experience, but
Mustangs, right? That's the Mustangs.
It must go Mustangs. And it's like, there's flags in the house. Like it's very interesting. Some schools have that and some don't. And a lot of it's just because those schools haven't been around long enough, probably.
Yeah, probably. I think I just think there's just something cachet about that, right? Like there is something about that market. So there are going to be students that go into that area. There are going to be students that are moving into the same school you're going to. And as an investor, do you care if there's a big flux of students going to Guelph Humber or if they're going into Queens? I don't know. I know a lot of them that don't. Like they're all paying rent, so who cares? But at the same time, I think from a perspective of just, again, looking for prime real estate, prime things, I just think it is a factor. I think it's something that should be considered. I think it's something that works into it. There's a pride that comes along with that. Now, in saying that, the Queen's homecoming is legendary for what it does to the city, you know. But yeah, there's a certain pride about it all.
So what type of homes, projects do you like in Kingston? You said you can find some great deals right now. Yeah,
so we're tending to look at two different neighborhoods or two different areas. One is very close to the university and within like a kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers away from the school. And then the others are kind of more out to the western suburbs of Kingston. And they're your prototypical bungalows that you've seen 100 times before in every other market, 80s, 60s, 70 built bungalows, right? They're always the same general type of property. But I think you have to take a different approach to both. The Queen's students tend not to be trying to go out to the suburbs and live there at all. So it's a different tenant base when you go out that way. So specifically around the university, you know, a lot of these houses are old Victorians or big old houses like you would see in every other kind of major old city. I think the opportunity there is in getting these houses and kind of chopping them up into 3 units with additions built off the back tends to be the easiest format of it. You can do it with garden suites, but it gets a little tricky. The lots are limiting on some of them. But additions are always an opportunity and a possibility. But chopping them up into 3 units allows you to diversify your tenant profile. You can also get some young professionals that are still trying to live kind of in the hedge of they've like recently grad students or grad students themselves. And I think that higher quality of student tends to want to live not so much in a frat house, but in a isolated area, kind of modern condo lifestyle, like where it's 2 bedrooms,
more of their bedrooms. Own apartment.
Yeah. And so Kingston, as I mentioned before, Kingston's put in a cap essentially on 8 bedrooms per property. Okay, so it means that in time, you know, a lot of people are seeing this as a negative because it eliminates how many bedrooms you can stuff into these houses for student rentals. I think that in time, what you're going to find is that there's going to be a supply-demand issue that occurs, and therefore, who has the best layout of these 8 bedrooms may win the day, and that property may be valued more than somebody else who doesn't have that well of a layout. So I think looking at these properties and starting to look at how can we build out these additions, how do we add the units, do we get 332, do we do it in a, you know, like what format makes sense, and based on what the property can provide makes that direction kind of go the right way.
What is it about these Victorian homes that it makes it seem easy to chop up?
They're huge.
It's just the size, like what?
Yeah, they're grander. Like they had parlors, and they had the intention of being a grand home, and so
multi-generational.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think so. It's funny. Like I don't even know if multi-generational living. Maybe it was more like, you know, maids and people that had to live in the house at the same time as the people who owned the house. You know, you had these kind of service-oriented people kind of living in the same home, and so maybe that's, you know, you see attics and stuff like that. But I think ultimately, when I joke with people, it's like if you ever told the person who originally built this house in 1930 that it was going to be chopped up to 11 bedrooms and rented to 20-year-olds, they probably would have burned the house down themselves.
Yeah, they're rolling in the grave.
They're rolling in the
grave. For
sure. And so remembering and reminding people, like, you're a caretaker for this property. Like you're eventually going to be not the owner of this property either. right? And so bringing the highest and best use to this property makes...
Their fancy dining room is just now 2 bedrooms with like, posters of rappers and singers on the wall.
That's right.
Like,
I find it so funny when you walk into these houses and they're like these beautiful, elegant marble fireplaces in the parlor that are like boarded up and closed off. They're just ugly and I can't put anything in there. It's so funny. But yeah, I think that ultimately, you're a caretaker and you're not going to hold this property, when you die. So you need to conform it and construct it in a way that makes a lot of sense going forward. And I think there's an opportunity in doing that.
So what do the numbers look like on this type of property?
You can get rents into the 800 through, even as high as $1,000 a room, depending on what you're offering and the luxury that you're providing and the location, right?
Up to 8 rooms. And then what about adding all the units and chopping the house up?
I think that when you get into the chopping of the house up, I think that there's an added value built into that because you're no longer a single family home that's being comped out to single family homes. So if you go to a refi down the line, they're not going to be looking at you in the same way as a lot of student rentals where it's like, yeah, I can see your rent, but they're all on the same lease or some version of your lease structure. And this is really just a single family house that's really not that safe right now, the way you're running it, or it's not really conducive to what we're comping out to. So by chopping them up into like a triplex format, you've now elevated this property, which makes it really easy for banks and lenders to refi. It makes it really easy to understand your rents and understand your income. It makes it really easy to be like, yeah, you stand out amongst this village of properties. You look different. You have different features to you. And
is it also now more based off the income of the property? With the multiple units?
Like everything changes, right? Like it changes how lenders and how people are looking at your property long term. And so I think when you can kind of wrap your head around that, it makes sense to put the money into the property. It's not going to be, look, these houses have been here for almost 100 years, some of them. You're not going to see that house drop to zero. Like it's not going to zero. So you by making these improvements, you're not burning money away. You're not doing something that we're not adding hot tubs into this, on the roof.
Yeah.
We're putting things into here that have value and hold value. One would imagine that value is going to go further into the future as value of everything goes up in time with money printing. And looking at these houses, there's been a significant pullback. These houses last year in the peak were selling at $1.3 million, $1.4 million, $1.5 million, some of them. And now they're down into the 800s and 900s, 700s. So you're essentially just going to take the equity that's pulled back and reinvest it back into these improvements. And try to take advantage and recreate what's already there and improve it so that going forward, the value is easy to unlock.
These Victorian homes, can you run into issues just with how old they are?
Of course. They've got problems. There's no way around it. It goes back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like, this isn't easy. This isn't going to be, for the faint of heart, right? So if you're an investor who wants, no thought process, this isn't really for you. But I think that for those that are interested and willing and can see that there's gold on the other side of that hill, it's worth exploring. And there's a solution. Look, it's construction. There's always a solution. It's just time and money, right? So if you're willing to solve those problems with time and money, then you'll be okay. But I think ultimately you got to get in there. You got to figure it out and you got to make sure. Now, I say that. I've steered people away from a lot of Victorian homes because this is too much time or this is too much money. So there goes back to your boots on the ground. Having an experienced person walk around with you and highlight, like, that's going to be a problem. Like, we're going to have a big problem here.
Yeah, it's so huge. So student rentals, what if an investor comes up to you and just wants something simple? They don't want to chop up an old Victorian home into the 3 units, but they're just looking for something that could cash flow or break even, just a long-term hold. What are you kind of steering them towards or recommending?
I think it's just a matter of getting the best lot that you can get and getting to that duplex, triplex of a bungalow, essentially. It's probably the easiest way, right? Cash flow is an equation to a degree, right? Like, if I put more capital in, I can definitely make a cash flow. If I buy it in cash, I can make a cash flow every month. That's not hard. It's like, yeah, but is there a better use of my capital? Tends to be the next question, right? So for use of capital, I would be looking at properties that are going to hold value, properties that are going to be able to make sense for you in the interim, buying turnkey duplexes or turnkey triplexes or any of those things that you can get your hands on, always probably the best version. The downside to that is that you may have to inherit some tenants. That's usually, there's always a give and a take, and you're going to have to make some kind of give to make the numbers make sense or to make the deal make sense. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to do the work and you don't want to improve it and you don't want to change it, then you don't get the brand new tenants typically at market rent with everything finished and brand new with all the renovations done, so you don't have to worry about fixing anything. You got to pick which lane you want to be in.
So you like Kingston right now, and it's more of a down market, but Belleville, Quinte West, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, so like Trenton, for anybody who's out there, Quinte West, like what is that? It's a big area, but just Trenton, military base.
Okay, military base. What are the strategies there? Are you still helping people out in those regions?
Still doing it, just being very picky when we're talking to people in there. I've got clients in there right now that we're renovating from property from last year that is coming through, and these units are coming to market. It's fine. Like we're making numbers work and we're making it all make sense. The rents are strong. You're still renting top floors of bungalows for $2,300, $2,400 plus utilities. You're still getting $2,000, $1,900 in the basements. You're getting strong numbers.
What would the purchase price be on something getting those numbers?
Right now, we were, towards the end of last year, we were picking up around $430 to $470, and now they're up around $500, $5 and change.
Oh wow! And then so that's after the conversion, like all.
No, that's your buy-in, and then you've got to convert. So then you got to put your $100,000 in, $120,000 in to convert it, and then you're out the other side. So call it six and change.
Wow, but 23 up and you said 19 down?
Yeah, that's another reason why there's a lot of saturation. The rents were strong.
Yeah.
So I think that there's still opportunities in those marketplaces. There's still opportunities, but I am always very, very picky going in there. So I'm now in that scenario, I'm getting like uber picky. Like you better have something in this property that I can't find again, or that's very difficult for me to find.
What would an example of that be? Highlight features.
Being on one of those prominent neighborhood streets on the east side, like Old East Hill and Belleville, has got a lot of prominent old Victorian homes with very, very large lots that are, big homes, like 2,900 to 3,100, 3,500. They're 100-year-old homes. So that's why I know the square footage doesn't seem impressive. But when the house is 100 years old, it can be pretty big. In a prominent area close to downtown and transit and all of your stuff, right? So if that's coming up for grabs and there's a way to kind of turn those into 3 and 4 unit properties, that's very appealing. If it's already been done and it's already converted into a 3 or 4 unit property, that's very appealing. If it's right on the waterfront or if it's close to waterfront, that might be appealing. But there's just got to be something about it that makes it more than just its price.
Mm-hmm. In these communities, like what are people doing for work? What are their jobs? Kingston's a bigger community. Like when you have like
more understandable
100,000 plus, like it's almost a self-circulating thing. Like there's some bigger industries, sure, but then there's, people need gas, they need food. Like there's just enough jobs going around.
Yeah.
What about these
Belleville's driver is Procter & Gamble. It's also got a new Amazon distribution center opening. It's located pretty much directly in between Kingston and Toronto. So you have this benefit of being right on the 401 trunk line. There's not a lot of things as far as cities go on that 401 line that make a lot of sense, right? So people don't really consider, but if you're a transport truck driver and you're going from Montreal to Toronto, there are drivers that make that entire drive back and forth. But there are also drivers that stop in the middle. And they drop their 40-foot truck, 40-foot trailer, pick up another trailer from a guy who came from Quebec, and the two of them turn back around and go back their separate ways. Mm-hmm. So there's transit lines like of infrastructure that are going back and forth. That's the reason Amazon's starting to come out this way, is just because its proximity to those two major markets is very close. You're the halfway point for both of those major markets, right? Ottawa.
Everybody wants that 2-day shipping.
Yeah, Ottawa and Toronto. Like you're right in the middle of what's actually now becoming the expansion of Durham and the expansion of Ottawa in down to Kemptville and into those Arnprior, and those areas are starting to get bigger. And so by Amazon taking advantage of cheaper industrial prices, they're locking in for the next 40, 50 years with a very solid infrastructure move. The other thing that's always a good consideration when talking about places like Belleville, you should keep in mind, like if you try to find industrial commercial space, I was just at a golf event last week with a guy who has a sheet metal company. So he's been in by the airport in Toronto here, Mississauga way. He's been there for like 35 years. And so he's got 10,000 square feet. He's taken another 7,000. He's got like 17,000 square feet of good commercial space to do his sheet metal business. Landlord comes to him and tells him there's a rent increase coming that's massive because he's been not paying market rents for all these years. Now's the time he's going to pay. Well, I'm going to go buy my own building then. But you turn around and there's no buildings to buy. And if you do have to buy them, they're like 9 million, 10 million. They're excessive. It's a lot of capital out of pocket and things just don't make sense. Try finding rental space in that commercial industrial. You're paying $35 to $55 a square foot, right? For those same rentals. In Belleville, we're doing it for 14 to 20. And we're building 1.5 million square feet. So there's an opportunity just in that one main thing. Now, for that guy's business, it doesn't make sense. He's not going to leave his commercial business that he's built there with all of his connections. But for some businesses that are bigger and larger and can handle it, bringing buildings or consuming buildings in Belleville makes sense for you because you're exposing yourself to new markets this way. So there are jobs coming that way. But right now it's Procter & Gamble, it's manufacturing, it's the Trenton military base, the largest air base in Canada is located in Trenton. There's a significant amount of jobs that come from that military base, and then all the people that service that base and kind of work in and around that base. So
does the military provide housing, or is
they do? They and again, they're short of housing, so they're building more. There's a wait list to get into the military housing. People forget. I don't know if they forget or they just don't know, but military gets placements every 2 years, so you get orders and you get sent to a new place. That's just occurred in May and June. And so those placements tend to be big tick ups to both supply. People sell because they got to go in, and then demand because they bring them into place and they got to find somewhere to live in very short periods of time. So there is a community, like a market to that. I wouldn't push all my chips on the military base because there were incentives for them to live somewhere else. And there's some, these guys don't make, these people, they're not guys, but these people don't make a little bit of money. They make good money. So if you can buy the house, they can probably buy it too. They're just, and some of the best flippers I've seen in that area are military guys. They buy, they're here for 2 years. They improve while they live there and they sell it and move out and go to their next place. So,
smart.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you did a lot of flipping yourself. You mentioned before we started recording short-term rentals. Was that specifically in Prince Edward County? You were doing a lot of that?
Yeah. And so short-term rentals in the county kind of became a big thing. They've for the last 3 years over COVID, they just exploded. They became so large. I think at one point right before COVID, 2019, 2020, I was on AirDNA and it was like, there's like 1,300 Airbnbs in a very, very small community. Like, wow. There's not a lot of houses. If there's 10 or 15,000 houses, I'd be surprised, right? So it was a big chunk of the population was being used as Airbnbs. And at the time, 2017, I was using AirDNA and you couldn't even find Prince Edward County on AirDNA. I had to put in a special request to get the data because I couldn't just search it and find it, right? Now it's this massive hotspot for Airbnbs, and there's tons of data coming out of there, and there's property management companies everywhere, and so Toronto has flowed in and overfilled this marketplace, and it's done well. I think they're hurting right now. I think all Airbnbs are hurting in this season of kind of reduced spending, and just traveling is a little easier now. So, but during COVID, it really much exploded. So we had an Airbnb that we converted in the town of Wellington. It did fairly well. But again, market peaked out and kind of went in, and partnerships kind of go their own ways. And so we moved off the property for probably more of what you were saying, just to be, into a different place. And it did really well. And so in looking at Airbnb properties, the hedge that I would say is that you have to always consider that in pretty much every market in Ontario, other than a few, you're looking at 120 days to 140 days of rental time. It's not an all-year rent, right? So Airbnbs in the county in November, December are really not that in demand. So you have to kind of make your numbers work based on those shortened rental periods.
Is that based off both 3-season and 4-season homes, would you say?
I think it's just in general. Like, there's just not as many things to like. So if I look at Airbnb properties right now for myself, if I'm looking for an Airbnb property, I tend to be looking towards Mont Tremblant way, right? Just because it's a true 4-season market. Collingwood gets the same benefit. Like it's a true 4-season market. There's golfing, there's bike riding, there's water, there's a lot of things that can happen when I go to these places. In the county, it's like, why are you there? I'm there for the vineyards, I'm there for the good time, I'm there for the sunsets, I'm there for the biking, like bike riding. Like there's a lot of those type of things. There's a little bit of seasonal stuff in there, but they tend to be for the locals. So like snowmobiling and things like that, that's usually what the local guys are doing. Hunting is local guys. Like nobody's coming there for that, right? So down seasons because of the winter, just in general. You can have the best house there. It's just probably not very, active in November.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Montreal and Quebec, actually. Have you looked out that a ways? You mentioned
so it's on my list. Yeah, it's on my list. It's actually part of my, vision board of things to have. I have this vision of figuring out a property, either, just outside of Mont Tremblant, some areas. There's a Cascades right around Rodden, which is really cool area.
It's absolutely gorgeous around Montreal.
Yeah.
And then the city just has so much culture.
Yeah.
Like it's a great spot.
The only thing that I don't, it's still on my list, but the things I don't know is just because I don't do deals in Quebec, and deals in Quebec are different, right? And so notaries and things like that are different. But yeah, so my vision there is picking up land in that general area from raw and bringing services in and looking at implementing some version of a prefab or preset home on a pad that can be created into a cabin, and it's a useful place for my family and us to use during Christmases and winter breaks, and then it rents and sustains itself for the remainder of the year to kind of pay itself off. So that's definitely on my vision boards of where I'm going and properties I want to add.
At this stage of your investing journey, are you now focusing on lifestyle investments, improving your life, as opposed to just trying to make more money, build more wealth? Are you trying to balance the two?
I think I'm when it comes to make more money, build more wealth, I've learned the lesson to put more time and energy into perfecting my business. I want to put a lot more of my energy into that. I want to be better at what I do, and I want that to generate a lot of that wealth to come. I think protecting wealth in real estate is essential, but I think as far as what I'm looking at is in real estate in this area, it's very much now lifestyle driven. I'm kind of looking at those properties of like, how do they implement into my life and how do they work? I have a commercial property in the Prince Edward County area. That's right at the gates of the county. So as you come off the 401, like you drive right by my building, like there's really nothing else to look at but my building. And so we've put I think I was just telling you this, we put 2 food trucks in the front this year. We've re-rented it. I had a business running out of there that we stopped doing in December, and we had this building and we didn't know what to do with it. So we've kept this piece of it for my wife's design company. And then we've chopped up the rest of the building and rented it out to different businesses. And then we've put these food trucks directly, 2 food trucks, a Mexican truck and a burger truck right in the front in the parking lot. It's doing really well. They've actually done really, really well.
So are these companies you hired, like food truck?
Yeah, we just rent their tenants. Yeah, they're tenants that are renting space and running their businesses. And
how did that? Do you just advertise to them? Like, do you contact them? Like, how do you even get the food trucks?
Goes back to my other statement of God giving you what you need when you need it. So I was in this place. We closed down our business in December just because of a contractual difference. And I made the cardinal error. Did I really? I did. The cardinal error. We were in this place where we had shut down the business. And we had shut down the business, and we were looking at this property, and we were starting to figure out how to use this property better. It's a big building, and it's in a great location, and we have no intentions of getting rid of it. So how do we use this business and kind of make this work, this building, and make it work? And so we chopped the building all up. We rented it out to different people and different businesses, and then we've put it back up on the market and rented it that way. And so it's done really well. It's a fun way, and creative real estate, and something worth it. The upper part of my building, I think eventually in the next year or 2, I'm going to try to convert into a residential space and use it as a means of Airbnbs or stay setups. But yeah.
And there's enough people working there to pay the food trucks enough money to make it worth it for them?
Food trucks do well in the summer season. They do really, really well.
Oh, wow.
Really well.
Is it also because it's off the 401? You're getting a bit of traffic from that?
Everybody has to drive by our building to get into the county if they're coming from Toronto. So if they go through Belleville, they don't. but where we are off of Wooler Road, you end up having to go right past my building. So they've put a traffic ticker on like in front of my building a couple of years ago for some development projects that were going on. And for like 3 weeks in a row, they kept coming back, and it kept rolling over to 0 again. And it just kept like flipping over, and they're like, well, this can't be right. But it was right. There was just traffic constantly going by. And in the middle of COVID, when you couldn't go anywhere, but you could go to the county, we would have lineups at our building, like from the highway all the way down into the swing bridge that turns. And it was just massive amounts of traffic. So yeah, it does really well as far as traffic goes. It's one of those properties that you have to drive by to get to it.
Yeah. Can you talk about the business and working with Scott McGilvray?
Yeah, so my wife and I, right before COVID, when we moved out there, we did the Airbnb conversion, and we had flipped the property in Wellington. We had looked around and noticed that there wasn't a ton of people doing that business of countertops and kitchens and things like that, doing that business. So we went back and we made an agreement with a company out of Markham, and we had brought their products and their services to the county. That's why we got the building in the first place. It was right there. So we started a countertop company, and it went really well in 2019. COVID kind of just hit. We knew people from Toronto were coming, and they all just kind of crashed over all at once. And as a result of that, we did, about 700, almost 800 countertops in 3 years, which kept us really, really busy and really moving. And around 2019, end of 2019, 2020, Scott McGilvray was doing the Vacation House Rules. He had just started and the show, and there were 3 or 4 properties in Prince Edward County that were being highlighted on the show. And so they were looking for businesses to help them. We ended up helping them for the first 2. They went really well. And so they just made us the countertop company for the rest of the show. So we did 12 episodes or so in the first season, and then we did the second season, and then by the third season we were like, okay, it's a lot of work. So So what's that experience like?
Like you're being filmed, like you're in the episodes?
Yeah, so the harder part is coordinating all of their projects during COVID, which was the hardest part, because they had projects all over the place, and controlling our crews and kind of getting them all out. And then, as a payoff, I guess you could say, or just a means of making this equal for both parties, they do episodes where they shoot in the building. So first season, we do it at the warehouse in Markham, and in the second season, episode 5 or 6 or something like that, they do it in our actual shop. And so McGilvray, the designer that was with him, Deborah, I believe, she brings the clients in, and they walk through the property, and we look through it all, and we...
So you're chatting with them, and you're getting some footage, some showtime.
Yeah. Crew was in there for like 4 or 5 hours at our shop shooting.
How scripted are these HGTV shows? Like, are they telling you what to say? Or they
are not telling me what to say, but the people that like Deborah and them have a script, and they're the crews. My hat's off to them. I didn't realize how much a crew works on these things and how much they're very much involved, and they make the whole thing make sense, because when you're in it filming it, you're like, how is this a show? Like, how does a show come out of this? But they are magicians, and when they're done, there's a show out of it.
So the clients on there, they're scripted as well?
No, they're real people. They're just going into it and kind of just going with it. And I think that's why sometimes it can feel clunky, I think, as like a viewer watching, not necessarily like McGilvray shows, but like as a consumer of those type of shows. You can see that a lot of it gets clunky just because people aren't actors and they don't know what they're doing. And so that's probably the most real thing. But yeah, it's a process. They're very good at what they do. The designers are really good at what they do. They come in with kind of an overall vision of what they're trying to create, and then we match products to match what they're doing. You deliver the product. I think the biggest thing is like the misconception is just the flow is out of order. And again, we were doing it during COVID, which made it like 10 times harder. Right. Mm-hmm. And I remember we were so pumped about being on the show for the first season, and we had done all of this like prep and build up and marketing. And then it comes out, I never forget, it was like April of 2020 and March of 2020 is COVID. And so you've built up all of this stuff, and then they're launching a show in a lockdown, which is good for ratings, but not so good when you live in the county and people are trying to make sure that people are coming to Airbnbs during COVID.
Yeah.
So we kind of got caught in the middle of this like thing. Like you're
like
contributing.
The cultural war that's going on.
Because you've got local people like, stay away, stay out of our community, Torontonians. And you've got, a show where you're highlighting Airbnbs. And
so you also mentioned in our meeting that now there's this clash happening between
I think
Torontonians who moved there, the locals.
Yeah.
So would you recommend kind of not doing a short-term rental there right now?
I think you just have to be cautious. I think you just have to be aware. There's lots of short-term opportunities there. I think in the last 3 or 4 months, you're seeing way more houses coming up that are for sale, that are beautiful homes, that are saying they're active STAs. But you have to just watch and make sure you're understanding the rules. There's new bylaws in place. There's definitely rules in place to owning a short-term rental in the county. They've not made it easier to operate one of these. They've made it more difficult and more expensive. And I think that for some people, they're vanity projects, like they're just vanity buys and they really don't care. They just want to own something there and use it, just like I want to do in Mount Tremblant. Like I just want to own something there and kind of make it work. There's people that are doing that for sure. But if you're coming in as an investor and you're kind of like, this thing's a cash cow, I mean, just be very careful. Run your numbers. Be sure you're sure of that, because it's a very condensed period of time. Mm-hmm. And when markets soften like they are, it's tough.
Okay. So you mentioned your overall thesis, but do you have a message to put out to investors, maybe in the GTA, Golden Horseshoe area, other areas of Southern Ontario that just don't know these markets, the east side or north of Lake Ontario, whatever you want to call it, where you are, Kingston, Belleville, these areas? What's your message to get out there about these markets?
When I got married to my wife, who was from Vaughan, and her father, my father-in-law, who's always been from North York and Vaughan, never left that area, very much a Don Bosco guy, if you know, you know. Mm-hmm. And he's just one of those guys that's always been around. And at my wedding 15, 16 years ago, I stood up and said, at the end of the day, it's East End boys and West End girls. And it was kind of like the punchline of the wedding speech, because, don't knock us, don't count us out, And I think that that'll always be the way. West is always built first. I give it to you. I will allow you to win that victory. The West always gets built first, but the East will always be the only way left to go. You can only go East. You're running out of space West. You're getting condensed West. There is not too many areas that can be developed anymore. And the East is raw and just waiting for you. And the 401 track line is there. The 407 touches all the way to the 35-115. The 416 comes down and touches all the way up to Ottawa. There is a chunk of land that is coming, and the developers they have bought for the next 20 to 30 years all around that area. They are coming. If you are a forward-thinking person, if you are a creative-thinking person, you're going to look at that marketplace and you're going to see it as the future. They doubted Oshawa and they doubted Clarington 10 years ago, and these markets have exploded. And there is only one way left to go, which is East. So don't count it out. Keep looking at it. And if you need it and you want an opinion, you should reach out, call us. See if we can help you.
Yeah. So how can someone reach out to you?
I think Instagram would be obviously the best. We've got some links that we can put in, I think, is what you usually do.
Yeah, we'll put them in there.
And by all means, reach out and reach out to the team. If you're a Rockstar member, reach out and say, that goofy guy that was on there talking about Kingston, what is he about? And how do I get a hold of him? By all accounts, we'll be there. The Your Life, Your Terms event will definitely be there at that. And you can come and find me. And we can talk about that in person and then set up discovery calls. We're always booking calls and setting up a system. So come and check us out.
Yeah, I should mention the October Your Life, Your Terms event. We're excited for this one. This is the most excited we've ever been for an event. We've got some huge speakers. Tom's told me I can talk about it on the podcast, but I can't mention specifics just yet. That's all coming soon. That's going to be a kick-ass event. You're probably going to hear about it, I'm sure, leading up to it if you're on our email list. I'll be talking about it on the podcast too, I'm sure.
In fairness, to just cover myself so that Tom doesn't beat me up, I just meant any Your Life, Your Terms event. So I wasn't trying to crack the story.
No, this is great. This is great. I wanted to talk about it because I'm excited. Like the level of speakers and the quality of information and some big announcements we're going to make there. We're excited for this one, especially in October. So I'm glad you mentioned it. And then before we wrap, how did you find out about Rockstar and kind of join our team here and work your way in? Oakville is a far way away from the East End boys, as you would put it.
Yeah. I think the reputation of Tom and Nick is very, very large. I think that I've always known about these two crazy guys that are marketing like crazy out in the end with a brokerage named is just stop you in your tracks. And then I've also had the privilege of working with Erwin Zito and a lot of that team and coming in the door with some really, really, really great people that are very high quality. This marketplace of Rockstar brokerage demands quality. And I think that that's appealing to me, to come in and work with people of such high quality and caliber. And I think that that's where I wanted to be. I think that when I look around, I've been in a bunch of different real estate brokerages in my time, and they're all, great for their own personal reasons. This one here was very much in the niche that I was trying to expand in, had good quality people in there, and just something I could build off of. And so I'm really excited to be part of the team. I've been here since January of last year, and I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
So for those that don't know, Steve is our boots on the ground in the East End, or I still don't know what you call it, because I just think of Durham region as the East End.
Yeah. So let's just call it the East Side. We'll say anything east of Durham, we can take care of for you.
Yeah.
So, there's limited market exposures, but if you're interested and you want to know what it's all about, we'll be happy to show you around. And we do tours and walk people through one-on-ones and kind of take them through the city and show them what's there. You've never been, by all means, we'll show you around and make sure you get a good vibe.
Okay, so we'll leave your contact information and stuff in the show notes. And you can also reach out to Rockstar if you want to. We can connect you. I'm sure you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And just at the end of your investing journey, or it's not the end, but at the end of this,
you know something I don't know.
At the end of this podcast,
doctor or wife.
Yeah. What are your big takeaways from 20, 15 years of investing? It seems like you're making some lifestyle decisions. What's the journey been like, if you could just sum it up?
I would say what I would tell my kids, which is life is a journey of lessons and learning. You must keep going. There is no turning back, and this too shall pass, and everything will be fine. But you must keep going. And if you take anything away from everything you do, which is just learn a lesson, just take something with it, stash it away, you'll use it again. There's something in everything. I'm eternally optimistic. I think that there's always something worth fighting for here. I think that the ability to learn a skill or learn a talent will separate you as time goes on. And so just keep pushing and learning those skills and adding to your toolbox. Somebody said that to me once, and I can't remember who it was, but just always add a new tool to your toolbox. If you're doing that, you're progressing, you're not losing, you're winning. And so, just really make sure you keep doing that, and just this too shall pass. This is a market where everybody wants to talk about doom and gloom. That's every market. Every market has ups and downs. It's a part of being a market. This is capitalism. This is markets. This is what they do. They're all cyclical. Calm down. We're going to be fine. We'll just rotate into the next cycle and we'll forget all about this. And 3 years ago, we had no idea this was coming. And looking back at it, we had no idea what was going to happen 3 years ago. So it's just part of the journey. And just really make sure you work hard at getting better so that you're always ready for the next challenge.
And your dreams of being an entrepreneur when you were younger, do you think real estate has achieved that for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that real estate as a business can be done so many different ways. So find your niche, find your version of it, and you'll be fine. It depends on where you are. If you are a high earner and a CEO of something, congrats. You've done what you needed to do. That's your thing. Then in which case real estate is a protector of your wealth. If you're a young guy and you don't know where to go and you're like me and you came out and we're just trying to figure out a version, then it's got a lot of potential and upside in it as well, that you can go a different path. But just understand that those two people exist in the same ethos, the same world, universe. They're both in the same thing, and they both consider themselves real estate investors or operators. So
that's a great point. Yeah, it can just be so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
Awesome. Steve Phillips.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I hope this made sense and wasn't just too much rambling.
No, it was awesome. It was awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We'll wrap here.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.